I've always loved night duty. There's something special about them, whether it's the deserted streets illuminated by neon signs or the special silence, broken only by the occasional sirens of police cars. At such moments, Boston becomes a completely different city, as if immersed in a parallel reality where even time flows differently. That night, the rain was drizzling, turning the asphalt into a mirror reflecting the lights of the night city. I sat behind the wheel of a patrol car, driving slowly down Boylston Street. The walkie-talkie came to life periodically, relaying the usual reports of disorderly conduct in Dorchester, a drunken brawl outside a bar in the South End, a suspicious guy hanging around a closed store in the Back Bay. Lance, my partner and best friend for 12 years, was dozing in the passenger seat. His disheveled red hair, streaked with gray, looked almost gray in the dim light of the street lamps. He'd always been able to sleep in snatches, an important skill for a cop, especially on night duty. All patrol cars in the Fenway area. Report of an armed robbery on Park Drive. Suspect is a white male, early 30s, black jacket, blue jeans, believed to be armed. I turned on the siren, and Lance woke up instantly, as if he'd never slept at all. 12 years of working together had taught us to work as a unit. While I was driving, maneuvering between the sparse traffic, he was already contacting the dispatcher with details. "Looks like our guy's heading toward the subway station," Lance muttered, peering out the darkness outside the window. "Garrett, why don't we take a shortcut through the alley by the old bakery?" I nodded, turning the steering wheel sharply. Donovan's old bakery had been closed for about 5 years now, but that was what we called it by habit. I used to buy fresh croissants there every morning for Vivian. She liked to eat breakfast in bed on weekends, leafing through the paper and planning her articles. The thought of my wife echoed in a deep ache somewhere in my chest. For the past few months, it was as if a wall had grown between us, invisible but no less real. Vivian had been late to work more and more often, smiling less and less often, responding more and more coldly to my attempts to talk. Something was happening, but I had no way of knowing what it was. "I see him!" Lance's voice snapped me out of my musings. "Black jacket heading towards the station!" I braked sharply, blocking the suspect's path. Lance had already jumped out of the car, holding his gun at the ready. "Boston police! Freeze in place!" The robber, of course, didn't listen. They never listen. He darted away, trying to hide in the maze of alleys. I rushed after him, feeling the adrenaline rushing through my veins. Chases are always youthful, always a return to the days when I was just starting out in the service, full of enthusiasm and faith in justice. The rain intensified, making the chase more difficult. My soles slipped on the wet asphalt, and drops of water ran down the collar of my uniform jacket. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lance moving in a parallel course, trying to cut off my escape route. The perp turned down another alley, but it was a mistake, a dead end. A high brick wall blocked his escape route. He turned around, snatching his gun, but Lance and I already had him in our sights. "Drop the gun! On your knees, hands behind your head!" My voice echoed off the walls. It's moments like this that make time stand still. You see every detail with incredible clarity. The raindrops running down the perpetrator's face, his shaking hands on the grip of the gun, Lance's tense posture to my right. Any wrong move could be my last. Fortunately, the guy wasn't stupid enough to start a gunfight. The gun fell to the wet pavement with a thud, and its owner slowly sank to his knees, clasping his hands behind his head. Later, while filling out paperwork at the station, I caught a concerned look from Audrey Page, a young detective in the organized crime unit. She was working at a nearby desk, occasionally glancing in my direction. "Everything okay, Garrett?" she asked finally, flicking her long, dark hair behind her back. "You seem kind of distracted today." I tried to smile, but it didn't come out very convincingly. "It's okay, just tired. Night duty isn't as exhausting as it was when I was younger." Audrey clearly didn't believe me, but she didn't insist. She'd been with us for 3 years, and in that time she'd learned to know when it was best not to ask questions. Instead, she silently placed a cup of coffee from the machine in front of me. "Black, 2 spoonfuls of sugar, just the way I like it." "Thanks." I nodded, taking a sip of the hot beverage. Outside the window, it was beginning to lighten, turning the blackness of night into the grayness of early morning. Soon my shift would be over, and I'd have to go home, where a cold bed and an even colder reception from Vivian awaited me. Dexter Ramirez, our supervisor, peeks out of his office. "Montgomery Hawthorne, great job today. The robber has already confessed. Turns out this is his third robbery this week." Lance, who was busy with his reports 2 desks away from me, gave a thumbs up without looking away from his computer monitor. His red stubble looked almost golden in the morning light, and there was a deep line of concentration on his forehead. I mechanically filled in the last columns of the report, but my thoughts were already at home. Vivian usually wakes up early. She likes to catch the morning news before work. I used to find her at the kitchen table with a laptop and a cup of green tea, absorbed in writing another article. She was beautiful in such moments, focused, with a light blush on her cheeks and sleep-disturbed hair. But lately, those cozy morning moments had disappeared. Now, when I returned from my night shifts, more often than not, I would find an empty kitchen and a note saying she had already left for work. When did it start? When did our lives start falling apart? "Hey, Garrett," Lance put a hand on my shoulder. "How about a beer after your shift? Sullivan's just opened up." I shook my head. "Not tonight, man. I want to try to get Vivian home. Maybe we can have breakfast together." "Suit yourself." He shrugged, but something strange flashed in his eyes. Anxiety. I didn't have time to make it out. That expression disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Leaving the station an hour later, I felt squeezed like a lemon. Boston was already waking up in the morning. Clerks rushing to work, coffee shops opening, the first buses and subway trains carrying sleepy passengers. The rain had finally stopped, but the sky remained leaden gray, promising a new charge for the evening. I got into my old Ford. Vivian always said it was time for me to change to something more presentable, but I was used to this faithful friend. With the familiar rumble of the engine, I headed home to our little house in Jamaica Plain that we'd bought 5 years ago. It had seemed like the beginning of something wonderful then, our own nest, a place where we would grow old together. Now I found myself thinking more and more that the house was becoming too big for 2 people who were less and less likely to find common ground. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed that the light in the kitchen window was on, which meant that Vivian hadn't left for work yet. It was unexpected and, admittedly, a little unsettling. She was usually in the newsroom by this time, preparing materials for the morning meeting. The old hinge of the gate creaked habitually. I'd been meaning to oil it for a long time, but I'd never got around to it. The first spring flowers were beginning to bloom in the front garden. Vivian had always been fond of gardening, though lately she'd paid less and less attention to it. The front door was unlocked. I noticed my mother-in-law's shoes in the hallway, expensive leather pumps from some Italian designer whose name I could never pronounce correctly. Beatrice Campbell rarely showed up at our house for nothing, and her presence did not bode well. "Ah, there's our valiant guardian of order," came her cold voice as I entered the kitchen. Beatrice was sitting at the table, elegant even at this early hour, perfectly styled pearl necklace, a suit that probably cost more than I make in a month. Vivian stood at the window, nervously clutching a cup of cold coffee in her hands. She was pale, and there were wrinkles at the corners of her mouth that I hadn't noticed before. When our gazes met, she quickly looked away. "Good morning," I tried to keep my tone casual. "I didn't expect to see you so early, Beatrice." "Oh, I'm sure there's a lot you didn't expect." My mother-in-law took a sip from her cup. It was, of course, her favorite French china she always brought with her. God, how she hated our simple, everyday service. "Mom's here to talk," Vivian said quietly, still looking out the window. "We all need to talk, Garrett." I slowly lowered myself into a chair, feeling the fatigue from the night's duty piling up with double the force. The kitchen smelled of freshly brewed coffee and Beatrice's perfume. Too sweet, too expensive, too out of place in our simple kitchen with its plaid curtains and old wooden countertop that Vivian and I had once picked out together at a flea market. "My daughter told me everything." Beatrice set the cup on the saucer with impeccable precision. "To be honest, I always knew she would. Policeman is not a profession that disposes one to marital fidelity. All those night shifts, young co-workers. What are you talking about?" I shifted my gaze from my mother-in-law to my wife. Vivian? Don't pretend. Vivian finally turned to me. Her voice trembled. I know all about your adventures. Those late-night calls, the cryptic messages you delete right away. I felt irritation rising inside. What adventures? What messages? Vivian, what are you talking about? About that woman at the station. She was almost shouting now. You think I don't see the way she looks at you? The way you're always whispering? Audrey? I couldn't believe my ears. Are you talking about Audrey Page? She's my coworker, for God's sake. Ah, now that has a name, Beatrice purred. How nice. I stood up, feeling the vein on my temple begin to throb. Look, I don't know what fantasies have arisen in your heads, but there's nothing between Audrey and me. She's just a coworker, like dozens of other officers in the precinct. Then why are you deleting her messages? Vivian took a step toward me. Why do you hide your phone when she texts? I don't. I paused, remembering. Indeed, I had deleted messages from Audrey a couple times, but they were about a gift for Vivian. We were preparing a surprise for her birthday, and Audrey was helping me with the selection. It's not what you think. Of course, it's never what we think. Beatrice stood up, smoothing the non-existent creases in her immaculate suit. Vivian, my dear, I told you that men like that never change. Your father was right all along. Lawrence Campbell, my father-in-law, had never hidden his disappointment with his daughter's choice. A successful businessman, owner of a chain of law firms, he had dreamed of marrying Vivian to someone in his circle, an ambitious lawyer or a promising financier. Instead, she'd chosen a simple cop, and Lawrence had never been able to accept that. Vivian, I took a deep breath, trying to speak calmly. Let's discuss this in private. No offense, Beatrice, but this matter is between the two of us. Oh no, it's about the whole family now. My mother-in-law patted Vivian on the shoulder. We won't let you continue to break my little girl's heart. Mom's right. Vivian crossed her arms over her chest. On her ring finger glittered her wedding band, a simple gold ring that I'd bought with my first police bonus. I remember Beatrice snorted when she saw it. That's it? No diamonds? I'm not cheating on you. I felt each word scratch my throat. Never cheated, and I'm not going to. I love you. Love you? Vivian grinned bitterly. Then why are you at work all the time? Why do you miss important events? Why do I have to go alone to newsroom parties where everyone looks at me with pity? I'm a cop, damn it! I raised my voice. I have responsibilities. I have an oath. I can't just pick up and go off duty because there's a cocktail party in the newsroom. See? Beatrice shook her head. Work is more important to him than family. Always has been and always will be. I glanced at the clock. 8:30 in the morning. After a sleepless night, a chase, and an arrest, I just didn't have the energy for this conversation. I need to get some sleep. Can we discuss this later? Sure. Vivian grabbed her bag. Run off as usual. I'm on my way to the newsroom. Mom, let's go. I'll give you a ride home. They left, leaving me alone in the kitchen. The smell of Beatrice's perfume still hung in the air, mixed with the aroma of coffee. There were 3 cups on the table too from my mother's French set, and one of ours, a simple cup with a chipped edge. I remembered how Vivian had accidentally broken the saucer from that cup a year ago, and how we'd laughed trying to glue it back together. When had we stopped laughing together? The phone in my pocket vibrated a message from Lance. What's up, friend? Didn't look good after your shift. I didn't bother answering it. Instead, I went upstairs to the bedroom where the sheets on Vivian's half were cold and untouched. On her bedside table was a picture from our wedding, young, happy, confident about the future. I was in dress uniform, she in the simple but elegant dress she had chosen against her mother's wishes for a pompous celebration. Collapsing onto the bed in my clothes, I closed my eyes. Vivian's accusations, Beatrice's scornful tone, the memories of how we used to be. Sleep wouldn't come despite my fatigue. There was a baby crying in the next house, a police siren wailing somewhere in the distance, and the question in my head over and over again, why are you deleting her messages? I woke up in the late afternoon. It was starting to get dark outside the window, and my phone read 5:45. 3 missed calls from Lance, and 1 message from Audrey. Everything okay? You were kind of weird this morning. I deleted the message without even responding. Any communication with her now seemed dangerous, likely to exacerbate an already difficult situation. There was an oppressive silence in the house. When I went down to the kitchen, I found that the cups from the morning conversation were still on the table. Vivian always put the dishes away before she left, but today she must have been too upset. I washed them mechanically, trying to ignore how uncomfortable Beatrice's expensive china cups looked in our simple sink. The refrigerator greeted me with its dismal contents: a couple of yogurts, the remains of yesterday's pasta, and a bottle of white wine that Vivian had opened 3 days ago. We used to cook together a lot. She taught me how to properly chop vegetables and make real risotto. A policeman has to know how to shoot, but also how to create coziness, she laughed then. I pulled out my phone and opened our old photos: dinners together, trips to the park, evenings by the fireplace. When did all that disappear? When had we stopped being a couple who enjoyed the simple pleasures of life? The solution came suddenly. I dialed the number of Antonio's restaurant, the small Italian place where Vivian and I had celebrated our first anniversary. Luckily, there was a table for two for 8 o'clock at night. Vivian! I pressed the call button, listening to the beeps with a sinking heart. Hey, listen, I want to apologize for this morning. Why don't we have dinner together? I made reservations at Antonio's. The pause on the other end of the wire seemed endless. I'm busy writing an important piece. Her voice sounded detached. And anyway, do you think one dinner can fix everything? No, but it could be a start, I tried to speak softly. Please, Viv, remember when we sat there on our anniversary? You were in that blue dress. Again the pause. Okay, she finally exhaled. At 8 o'clock, but don't think it makes a difference. I spent almost an hour picking out a shirt and tie. It was strange. At work, I could make an instant decision in a critical situation, but now I stood in front of the mirror like a teenager before a first date. I settled on the navy blue shirt Vivian had given me last Christmas. She'd said it accentuated my eyes. Nothing had changed in the restaurant over the years. The same cream-colored walls with pictures of Italian landscapes, the same red checkered tablecloths, the same aroma of fresh pastries and basil. Antonio, the elderly owner with a bouffant mustache, recognized us and personally escorted us to our table. Ah, Signor and Signora Montgomery, he smiled, lighting a candle on the table. How long it's been since we've had you here. All so beautiful? Vivian came in at 8 sharp, wearing the very same blue dress. I could barely contain a smile she remembered. Her hair was gathered into an elegant bun, revealing her neck, where a thin silver chain, my 5th wedding anniversary gift to her. You look beautiful, I stood up, pushing back a chair for her. Thanks. She sat down, spreading the napkin in her lap. I was finishing up an article on the city's environmental problems, barely had time to change. Antonio brought the menu, but we both knew our order by heart. Ravioli with ricotta for her, spaghetti carbonara for me, and the bottle of Chianti we always took on special occasions. Remember the first time I knocked over a glass right on your dress here? I tried to lighten the mood. A slight smile touched her lips. You were so embarrassed. You gave me your jacket and kept apologizing. And you said it was a sign now I had to buy you a new dress. And you did. She swirled her wine glass. Spent half your paycheck on a designer dress, even though I was joking. There was a pause. Across the room, an older couple was dancing to soft music. Antonio always turned on old Italian songs in the evenings. Vivian, I covered her hand with mine. I know things have been bad between us lately, but I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix it. She didn't pull her hand away, but I felt her fingers tense. Everything? What about your job, your night shifts, your coworkers? I can switch to day shifts. I squeezed her hand. I'll talk to Dexter. He'll step in. And about Audrey. I swear there's nothing between us. She was just helping me with a gift for you. A gift? Vivian raised an eyebrow. I pulled a small velvet box out of my pocket. I wanted to give it to you for your birthday, but maybe now is the right time? Inside was a thin gold bracelet with a small feather pendant. Vivian had always said the feather symbolized her work as a journalist. I'd been saving up for it for 3 months, denying myself everything. Even Lance had noticed that I'd stopped going to the bar with him after my shift. Garrett! She touched the bracelet gently. It's beautiful, but no buts. I clasped the bracelet on her wrist. Just let me make it right. The food arrived and the conversation became less tense. Vivian talked about her new article. I shared a funny incident from work, carefully avoiding mentioning any coworkers. When she laughed at my joke, for a second it seemed like everything was back to normal. At the end of the evening, Antonio insisted on treating us to his signature tiramisu. To love, he proclaimed, winking at me. I hailed a cab. We'd both had wine and it would be unwise to drive. In the car, Vivian leaned against my shoulder as she had done before. Her hair smelled like jasmine, the same shampoo she'd used when we first met. Thanks for tonight, she said quietly as we pulled up in front of the house. It was nice. In the hallway, she lingered, looking at our wedding picture on the wall. You know, that's when Mom said I was making a mistake, that a cop couldn't give me the life I deserved. What did you think? I stopped beside her. I thought love was more important than money and status. She turned to me. And you know what? I still think that. She kissed me, lightly, almost weightlessly, but there was hope in that kiss. Walking up to the bedroom, I thought that maybe not all was lost. Maybe we can fix what's broken. The phone in my pocket vibrated a message from Lance. We need to talk tomorrow. It's important. I deleted the message without answering. The main thing now was to maintain the delicate balance that was beginning to be restored between Vivian and me. As I fell asleep, I heard her quietly pacing the bathroom, removing her makeup and getting ready for bed. Such a familiar, homey sound. The feather bracelet glinted on her wrist in the moonlight filtering through the loose curtains. The next few days passed in a strange, tense calm. Vivian came home more often in the evenings, and we even resumed the tradition of having dinner together. But something subtly changed. I noticed the way she furtively checked her phone, the way she flinched at every ring, the way she sometimes stopped with a blank stare in the middle of a conversation. That morning I woke up to the sound of falling drops. It was starting to rain. Vivian was no longer there, but there was a note on her pillow. Urgent trip for an interview. I'll be back for dinner. Kisses. The handwriting seemed more uneven than usual, like she was in a hurry or nervous. There was an untouched cup of coffee on the kitchen table still warm, so she'd left a while ago. Next to it lay her day planner, which she never left at home. It was so unlike the pedantic Vivian that I felt a stirring of unease inside. The phone rang Lance. He'd been persistent in trying to talk to me the last few days, but I'd avoided those conversations, focusing on trying to patch things up with my wife. Garrett, we need to meet. His voice sounded strained. This is really important. Look, I'm not having the best time. I started to refuse, but he interrupted. It's about Vivian. Something in his tone made me wary. What do you mean? Not over the phone. Why don't we meet at the coffee shop on the corner of 3rd and Maple in an hour? I agreed, feeling an unpleasant chill run down my back. My gaze fell on Vivian's forgotten day planner. I'd never read her notes. That was our unspoken rule, our respect for each other's privacy. But now my hand reached for the leather cover. Inside were the usual work notes, to-do lists, article outlines. But on the last page, I noticed a hastily written address, the Marriott Hotel in the business center. For some reason, that entry made me feel queasy. The cafe was almost empty, just a couple of students with laptops and an older man reading a newspaper. Lance was already waiting for me at the far table, tapping his fingers nervously on a cup of cold coffee. My usually chipper friend seemed drained and somehow guilty. Listen. He ran his hand over his face, avoiding looking me in the eye. I don't know how to say. Just say it. My voice came out sharper than I wanted it to. I saw Vivian yesterday, at Joe's bar. She was not alone. With who? Lance was silent, scrutinizing his hands. Who the hell was she with? I almost went to a shout, causing the students to turn in our direction. Look, maybe I was wrong. He finally looked up. It was dark and... Stop being sneaky. Are you my best friend or what? Precisely because I'm your friend. He took a deep breath. She was with Ramirez. Dexter Ramirez, our boss. A married man with 2 kids. It felt like a punch in the face. "You're wrong." My voice sounded muffled, as if from far away. They could have been discussing her article on police work. She's just working on that topic. In a semi-dark bar? At 9 o'clock at night? Lance shook his head. "Garrett, they were sitting in a booth, and it was ambiguous." I remembered the address in the day planner. The Marriott Hotel. The nausea intensified. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I tried!" He splashed his hands. "You've been avoiding me all week!" I stood up, feeling like I needed air. Lots of air. Outside, the rain had intensified, but I hardly noticed it. Scraps of memories swirled in my head. Vivian staying late at work, the strange phone calls, her accusations against me. Jesus, her accusations. It's classic, blaming someone else for something you're doing. When I got home, the first thing I did was turn on my computer and open our shared phone carrier account. The call detail was loading excruciatingly slow. There they were. Dozens of calls to the same number, usually late at night or early in the morning. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me it wasn't Ramirez. In the bedroom, in her bedside table, I found a new phone, a simple model I didn't even know existed. My hands shook when I turned it on. Several missed calls and one unread message. "Waiting for you at our place tonight. Miss you. L. L. Not R. Lance? No, it couldn't be. Not him. Not my best friend." I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the ground slipping from under my feet. The clock on the wall was ticking, an old mechanical clock that I'd repaired with my own hands the first year we were together. Vivian had laughed at my fiddling with the gears then, but was glad when the clock went again. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Each beat rattled my temples like a hammer. My work phone rang. Audrey's. "Garrett, are you okay? Not showing up for this morning's meeting isn't like you." Meeting. Shit, I'd completely forgotten about it. "Yeah, unwell?" My voice sounded hoarse. "I'll take a couple days off. Is something wrong?" You could hear the genuine concern in her voice. "You've been kind of weird lately. Lance, too." Lance. Bile came to my throat at the mention of that name. "It's okay." I tried to speak calmly. "Just need to deal with some things." I pulled whiskey from the kitchen cabinet, a bottle of Jameson's, a gift from Lance last Christmas. Bitter irony. The glass shook in my hand, and a few drops spilled onto the countertop, the same flea market piece we'd picked out with Vivian. The phone vibrated again, a message from her. "Running late? Important interview is running late. Don't wait up for dinner." The interview. Of course. I opened the day planner she'd forgotten this morning, flipped through to the last few pages. Strange notes flickered among the work notes, times and places of meetings, initials that told me nothing, or told me too much. In the hallway, our wedding photo stood on a shelf. I picked it up, gazing into the happy faces. Vivian in a simple white dress. She'd opted out of the lavish celebration her mother had wanted. I'm in my dress uniform. Lance, my best man, standing next to me, putting his hand on my shoulder. The next few days turned into a strange game of normalcy. I went back to work, smiling at my coworkers, filling out reports. Vivian made breakfast, talked about her articles, wore my gift bracelet. We even accepted an invitation from Lance and his wife Melissa for Saturday night dinner. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect. Every morning I woke up a minute before my alarm clock, listening to Vivian's breathing. Was she really asleep or just pretending? What or who was she thinking about? I began to notice details that had previously escaped notice. A new perfume, more careful makeup, small pauses before answering simple questions. Friday night we were sitting in the kitchen, me with a cup of cold coffee, she with her laptop, working on another article. Raindrops drummed on the windowsill, creating a cozy background noise. Almost like it used to be. Almost. "Lance called this afternoon," Vivian said, as if by the way, not taking her eyes off the screen. "Asked what kind of wine we preferred for dinner tomorrow night." I watched her face closely, trying to catch even a shadow of emotion. Nothing. A completely neutral expression, as if we were talking about the weather forecast. "And what did you say?" "That you like red dry." She looked up, meeting my gaze. "I remember correctly, don't I?" 12 years of marriage, and she's asking about my wine preferences. Lance, though, knows full well that I prefer whiskey, especially lately. Yeah, right, I smiled. The smile probably didn't come out very convincing, but Vivian had already returned to her laptop. Her phone vibrated, the regular one. The other one I'd found in the nightstand, the one she now always carried with her. A quick glance at the screen, a barely perceptible pause, then, "It's from work. I need to answer a couple emails." She got up and walked out of the kitchen. I could hear her coming up the stairs. The third step still creaked, even though I'd recently tried to fix it. That creak used to amuse us, but now every such sound echoed in my temples as a reminder of how much of our house was broken. Audrey noticed my condition at work. After another meeting, she lingered by my desk. "You know," she spoke softly, going through papers as if in between. "If you need to talk, I'm a good listener." I looked at her, young, sincere, with that perpetually disheveled dark hair of hers. It seemed suddenly funny that she was the one Vivian was jealous of. "Thank you, Audrey, but some things are best kept to yourself." She nodded but put a fresh cup of coffee on the table before she left. Black, 2 spoons of sugar. How does she know how much I like coffee? Saturday night came all too quickly. Vivian and I pulled up to Lance's house at 7 sharp. She always appreciated punctuality. It was an ordinary suburban house with a neatly mowed lawn and a porch swing for the kids. I'd helped install those swings last summer. Melissa met us at the door, a petite blonde with a perpetual smile and a habit of fiddling with her wedding ring. She worked as an elementary school teacher and was probably the most innocent person I knew. Come in," she hugged Vivian. "Lance is still fiddling with the grill in the backyard. Men and their passion for perfect steaks, right?" Vivian laughed, an easy, effortless laugh. How does she do it? How can she stand here hugging the wife of the man she's with? No, I still couldn't bring myself to finish that thought. Everything in the living room was the same as it had been on our previous visits. The family photos on the walls, the worn but cozy couch, Lance's vinyl record collection. Here's all of us together at a barbecue 2 years ago. Here's our trip to the lake together. Here's Christmas dinner at our house. "Hey, partner!" Lance appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands with a towel. "The steaks are almost ready. Come on, can you help with the sauce?" I followed him into the kitchen, feeling Vivian's eyes on me. Or was I just imagining it? "Try this." Lance handed me a spoonful of some kind of mixture. "It's a family recipe. My father taught me before he died." I remembered his father, an old Irish cop who'd been proud until his last day that his son had followed in his footsteps. I wondered if he'd be proud now. "Great," I nodded, not tasting it. "You seem tense." Lance leaned against the countertop. "Everything okay?" I looked at his hand clutching the towel. On his ring finger gleamed a wedding ring exactly the same one I had. We'd bought them at the same store, getting ready for our weddings. "We'll be like brothers," he joked then. "It's fine," I smiled. "Just tired a little. Work." "Yeah, work." He nodded. "By the way, Ramirez has been asking about you. Says you've been kind of scattered lately." Ramirez. Another name, another possibility. The number of choices was starting to make me dizzy. Dinner was going on in a strange atmosphere of feigned casualness. Melissa chattered about school stories. Vivian talked about her new article. Lance told stories from work. I was silent, watching. Here's Vivian handing Lance salt. Are their fingers touching for a split second or not? Here he tells a joke. She laughs a little longer than necessary. Or is it just me? Here she is fixing her hair, a gesture I remember from the first day we met. Who is she doing it for now? "Honey," Vivian touches my arm. "You haven't been eating at all. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, just brooding." I squeezed her fingers. They were cold. After dinner, Melissa insisted on showing Vivian her new orchid collection in the greenhouse. Lance and I stayed in the living room. "More whiskey?" He reached for the bottle. "That's enough, thanks." I eyed the amber liquid in my glass. "You know, I've been reminiscing about how we met at the academy." "Oh yeah," he grinned. "You were so proper. Everything by the book. And you always knew how to find workarounds." I looked up. "In everything." Something flashed in his gaze, anxiety, guilt, but it disappeared immediately. Listen, he leaned forward. If there's something bothering you, a lot of things bother me, Lance. I set the glass down. Like why my best friend is suddenly so caring. At that moment, the women returned. Vivian was discussing something animatedly with Melissa, but as she entered the room, she faltered half-heartedly. She was always good at sensing the atmosphere. We should get going. She glanced at her watch. We have to get up early tomorrow. The material needs to be turned in by morning. The goodbye came out crumpled. Melissa insisted on repeating evenings like this. Lance said something about watching soccer together. Vivian smiled and nodded. It was business as usual, nothing ordinary. There was silence in the car on the way home. Only the windshield wipers measuredly brushed the drops off the windshield. It had started raining again. That was a nice evening, Vivian finally said. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, looking at the road. Yeah, a good one. There was silence again. Only the sound of the rain and the measured tapping of the windshield wipers. After that dinner, something snapped definitively. I almost stopped sleeping, lying in the dark for hours listening to Vivian's breathing. Sometimes I thought she was awake too, just lying there, staring at the ceiling and thinking about something, or someone, or someone. My thoughts turned into an endless merry-go-round of suspicions, memories, and guesses. At the station, I started making mistakes, confusing names in reports, forgetting meetings, missing important details. Dexter Ramirez called me into his office Tuesday morning. Have a seat, Montgomery. He pointed to a chair without taking his eyes off the papers on his desk. I looked at his hands. The wedding ring glinted in the light of the desk lamp. What's been going on with you lately? Nothing, sir. My voice sounded hoarse. Just a little fatigue. He looked up, his eyes brown with golden speckles. Had Vivian noticed those speckles too? Why don't you take a vacation? You haven't been on vacation in a while. It's okay. I interrupted him more abruptly than I should have. I can handle it. Walking out of the office, I ran into Audrey. She was carrying a stack of folders and a cup of coffee, all of which flew to the floor from the collision. I'm sorry. I knelt down, helping pick up the scattered papers. My hands were shaking. Garrett. She touched my shoulder. You know Don't. I pulled away. Please, just don't. I stayed late at the station that night, sorting through old cases. I didn't want to go home, where every object reminded me of Vivian, of us, of what we'd lost or were losing right now. My phone vibrated. A message from her. Don't wait up late. Interviewing an important source. Interview. Source. Words that used to be just part of her job now seemed filled with double meaning. I opened the call detailer. The new number, the same one with the morning and evening calls, reappeared on the list. A 5-minute conversation an hour ago. Almost automatically, I dialed the number. It rang, 1, 2, 3, reset. A minute later, a message came from Vivian. Everything okay? Why did you call? So it really is her number. Second phone, for special contacts. There was a flask of whiskey in my desk drawer, a gift from Lance last Christmas. I took a sip. It had become an all too frequent way to cope with my thoughts lately. Montgomery? Ramirez's voice made me wince. Are you still here? Finishing my report, sir. I hastily put the flask away. He stepped closer, leaning on the edge of my desk. He smelled of expensive cologne, the same cologne I'd sometimes picked up from Vivian, writing it off as coincidence. You know, he spoke softly, looking somewhere over my head. Sometimes it's better to know the truth, no matter how bitter it is. I looked up, meeting his gaze. What did he mean by that? Was he hinting at something? Or was it paranoia finally clouding my mind? True, I grinned. Do you believe it exists, sir? It exists, he straightened. It's just not always where we look for it. He walked away, leaving me alone with an unfinished report and heavy thoughts. Outside the window, dusk was thickening, turning the city into a blurry canvas of lights and shadows. I got home around 9. There were no lights on in the windows, which meant Vivian hadn't come home yet. The hallway smelled like her perfume, a light floral scent with a hint of vanilla. I used to love that scent. Now it only made me nauseous. On the kitchen table lay the newspaper I'd forgotten this morning. On the spread was Vivian's article about corruption in the upper echelons of government. Investigative journalism by Vivian Montgomery. She'd always been proud of her last name, my last name. Now. The doorbell rang like a thunderclap. Audrey stood on the doorstep, drenched from the rain, with disheveled hair and a strange expression on her face. "Sorry for the late visit," she shuffled from foot to foot. "But there's something you should know." I stepped back silently, letting her into the house. She made her way into the kitchen, leaving wet footprints on the parquet. Vivian always scolded when I forgot to wipe my feet. "I've been wondering for a long time if I should tell you." Audrey sat down at the table, nervously rubbing the sleeve of her jacket. "But you have a right to know." "To know what?" I remained standing, looking down at her. "Today, I saw—" She took a deep breath. "I saw Vivian, with Lance." Time stopped. My ears rumbled, as if someone had turned on white noise at full volume. "Where?" My voice sounded like a stranger. "At the cafe on 7th Street. The same one, the little one with the blue curtains." She spoke quickly, like she was afraid to change her mind. "They sat in the far corner, and it wasn't a business meeting, Garrett. The cafe on 7th, Vivian's favorite place. She said it had the best blueberry pie in town. We used to go there on weekends. The three of us, with Lance. I swallowed the lump in my throat. What exactly did you see?" "They were holding hands, and then he kissed her." She didn't resist. I slumped back in my chair, feeling my legs wobble. Pictures of the past flashed before my eyes, of Lance helping Vivian with her coat, of them dancing at the Christmas party, of laughing at shared jokes. "How long ago?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "I don't know exactly." Audrey shook her head, "but some people at the station have suspected something for months." "And Ramirez?" burst out at me. "Ramirez?" She frowned. "What does that have to do with the warden?" "Lance, then. All this time, Lance. My best friend, my partner, the man I trusted with my life." "Go away." I stood up. "Please, just go." "Garrett." She stood up too. "Don't do anything stupid. Maybe we should talk to them." "Go away." The front door slammed, leaving me in the silence of the empty house. I pulled out my phone. The same number appeared in the call list again. 20 minutes ago. In the bedroom, in Vivian's closet, behind a stack of towels, I found a box. Inside were postcards, movie tickets, some notes, evidence of the secret life she led under my nose. Their secret life. The picture from our wedding was still on the dresser. I picked it up, gazing into the happy faces. Vivian in a white dress. Me in my uniform. Lance beside me, putting his hand on my shoulder. His eyes. How had I never noticed the look he was giving her before? The front door opens. The light footsteps of Vivian in the hallway, the sound of keys tossed on the nightstand, the rustle of a coat being removed. "Honey, are you home?" Her voice sounded carefree. Too carefree. "In the bedroom," I replied, sitting on the floor. She walked up the stairs. The third step creaked treacherously. She entered the room, froze on the threshold when she saw the broken picture and the blood on my hands. "God, what happened?" She rushed to me. "Don't touch me." My voice was calm. Too calm. "How long ago?" She froze with her hand outstretched. "What do you mean? How long have you been sleeping with my best friend?" Time stopped. I sat on the light-colored carpet, the same one we'd picked out together 3 years ago. Vivian had insisted on beige then. It will make the room lighter. "Garrett." She took a step back, and her perfume, the familiar floral scent, suddenly seemed stifling. "You don't understand." "What exactly don't I understand?" I looked up. "How my wife and my best friend betrayed me. How long have you laughed at me behind my back?" Fear flashed in her eyes. Real, not feigned. For the first time in a long time, I saw something sincere in them. "It's not like that." She pressed her back against the wall, as if trying to dissolve into it. "We didn't mean to. It just happened." "Just happened?" I let out a chuckle that made me cringe myself. What exactly just happened, Vivian? Did you accidentally fall into his bed? Or did he just happen to be in our house when I wasn't? She turned pale. I'd hit the mark then. They were here, in our bedroom, on our bed. The anger grew with every word. Stop it! Her voice shook. You're hurting me. Hurt? I took a step toward her. Didn't it hurt me when you accused me of cheating on you? When you pretended to be a loving wife at that dinner at their house? When you smiled at Melissa knowing you were sleeping with her husband? Vivian shrank back, wrapping her arms around herself. A feather bracelet glinted on her wrist, a gift from me, a symbol of reconciliation. How ironic. I loved you, she whispered. I really did. Loved? I walked over to the closet, pulling out a box of their secrets. Then explain this to me. All these notes, tickets, pictures. There's a whole life in here, Vivian. A life I had no place in. She looked at the box as if it were a snake ready to bite. You went through my stuff? And you slept with my best friend? The scream came out unexpectedly, making us both flinch. Somewhere in the next house, a dog barked. Rain drummed against the window just like it had on our first night in this house. I'll call Lance. She reached for the phone. We need to talk, all of us together. Oh, so now you want to talk? I grinned bitterly. Didn't you have that urge when you met at that cafe on 7th? Or at the Marriott Hotel? Her hand holding the phone trembled. Who told you? Does it matter? The whole precinct seemed to know. Everyone except the dumb cop husband who trusted his wife and friend too much. The phone in her hand came to life. The screen popped up L. What a cliché. I was afraid to even write his name down in full. Don't answer it, my voice sounded hoarse. Please, at least be honest now. But she'd already put the phone to her ear. Lance? Yes. Does he know? No, I'm home. Good. I watched as she spoke to him. Her voice had softened. There were intonations in it that used to be reserved for me. When had she changed so much? When had she stopped being my Vivian? He's coming over. She put the phone down. We need to explain everything. Explain what? I walked to the window. The rain had intensified, turning the world outside the glass into a blur. How did you plan your meetings? How did you come up with excuses? The sound of a car pulling up interrupted my monologue. The headlights illuminated the room for a moment, then went out. The door slammed shut. Garrett? Lance's voice came from downstairs. Can I come in? I remained silent. Vivian threw me a worried look and shouted, Come upstairs! His footsteps on the stairs were sure, familiar. How many times had he climbed those steps as a friend? And how many times as my wife's lover? Lance appeared in the doorway, wet from the rain, his red hair disheveled. I'd known that face for so many years, every feature of it. Now it seemed like a mask. Listen, friend, he began, taking a step into the room. I know you're angry. Friend? I laughed, and that laugh made Vivian flinch. Really? You're going to call me friend? We didn't mean to hurt you. He spoke softly, soothingly, the same tone he used to talk to suspects at the station. It's all complicated. Complicated? You know what's complicated? 12 years of friendship, 10 years of marriage, trust, loyalty. It's complicated, Lance. And what you did was just betrayal. We love each other, Vivian blurted out suddenly. It didn't happen right away, but… Shut up! I threw the picture at the wall. The frame shattered, crumbling with shiny dust. Don't you dare talk about love! Not here, not in our bedroom! Lance took a step toward Vivian, instinctively blocking her with himself. That gesture so natural, so familiar hit me harder than all the words. How long? I sank to the edge of the bed. How long? They glanced back and forth, a quick, almost imperceptible exchange of glances that spoke more than any words. A year, Lance finally uttered. A little over a year. A year, 365 days of lies, thousands of hours of pretending, millions of moments when they'd been together, while that Thanksgiving, I suddenly remembered. When you said you couldn't come because Melissa was sick, were you together? His silence was more eloquent than any answer. And your birthday, Vivian? When you went to your parents? She lowered her eyes. Tears glistened on her lashes. Real or another game? Jesus. I ran my hand over my face. All these months, every time the five of us got together, you, me, Lance, Melissa, Audrey, you'd sit next to us laughing, drinking wine. Audrey, Vivian straightened suddenly. She told you? She's always had a crush on you, you know? Don't you dare, I held up my hand. Don't you dare change the subject. Don't you dare try to blame anyone else. She's right about Audrey. Lance stepped forward. Everyone at the station saw the way she looked at you. Maybe if you'd... The impact was spontaneous. I don't even remember getting out of bed. Just in an instant, my hand slammed into his face and he recoiled, pressing his palm against his cheekbone. Garrett! Vivian rushed toward him. Stop it! It's okay, Lance straightened, lowering his hand. A bruise was building up on his cheekbone. I deserved it. Deserved it? I could feel my hands shaking. You deserved so much more than that. You were my best friend, Lance. My damn best man at my wedding. I know. He looked me straight in the eye. And I hate myself for it every day. But I love her. You love her? I nodded at Vivian. Then why still with Melissa? Why hiding out in hotels and cafes? True love, right? It's complicated, he began again. Enough! I held up my hand. Enough of this lying. Get out, both of you. Garrett, Vivian stepped toward me. Let's just get out! They left, quietly, almost sneaking like thieves. They were thieves, though. They stole my life, my trust, my faith in people. I was alone in a bedroom where everything screamed betrayal. The pictures on the walls, the generic knickknacks on the shelves, their damn box of souvenirs. The rain outside the window intensified, turning into a downpour. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. The phone on the bedside table vibrated. Audrey. I didn't answer it. After that night, time lost its meaning. I didn't go to work, turned off the phone, and just sat in the living room chair looking at the family photos on the walls. Each picture now seemed like a lie. Frozen smiles, fake intimacy, fake friendship. Vivian arrived the next day to pick up some things. I could hear her walking around upstairs, opening closets, pulling drawers, familiar sounds that were suddenly foreign. She didn't come down to say goodbye, just quietly closed the front door. Left on the kitchen table was her house key and a note. I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you. The paper smelled like her perfume. Toward evening, it began to rain. It seemed like it hadn't stopped in forever. The drops drummed on the roof, creating some kind of crazy rhythm. I pulled out a bottle of whiskey. Not a gift from Lance, no. I'd bought this one myself. Good old Jack Daniels didn't ask questions or demand answers. The second day, Beatrice called. I didn't answer, but listened to the message. I hope you realize you brought her to this point. She deserved better. Her voice, arrogant and cold, made me laugh. Of course, in her world, it couldn't be her daughter's fault. Everything must be the loser cop's fault. In the kitchen, everything was still as it had been that morning. The unfinished cup of coffee, the half-eaten toast, the open jar of jam, like a frozen snapshot from a former life. I couldn't bring myself to put it away. It seemed that if I brushed it away, the last link to reality would disappear. Audrey came twice. I heard her knocking on the door, calling my name. The third time, she slid a note under the door. I'm here if you need me, anytime. Her handwriting was surprisingly neat, almost calligraphic, a little thing I'd never noticed before. The station must have known by now. I wonder who reacted. Dexter Ramirez must have shaken his head with that trademark expression of disappointment. The young officers were probably whispering in corners. Such stories are always the best subjects for gossip. On the fourth day, I did turn on the phone. 37 missed calls, dozens of messages. One was from Melissa. Talk to me, please. I need to know the truth. What could I tell her? That her husband and my wife had created their own little world behind our backs? That all our dinners together, our trips, our holidays, were decorations for their secret meetings? In the bedroom, I found the hairpin Vivian had left behind. A small, silver pearl. I'd given it to her for our 5th anniversary. She often wore it when she was working on important articles, said it brought good luck. I wondered if she'd been wearing that barrette when she dated Lance. By the end of the week, the house had become a haunted museum. Every room held memories there was no escape from. Right here in the living room, Lance and I watched the championship finals while our wives made appetizers in the kitchen. In this chair, Vivian liked to read in the evenings with her legs tucked under her. On this couch, we made love on last month. Was she already with him then? Was she thinking about him? One morning, I think it was Sunday, the doorbell rang. The letter carrier stood on the doorstep with a registered parcel. Inside was a new issue of the magazine with Vivian's latest article, a big investigation into corruption in the city government. Her picture in the author's column, professional, stern, with that trademark half-smile of hers. Vivian Montgomery is her first name, my last name. I wonder if she'll keep it. There was another call that evening. Lance. Garrett. His voice sounded like he'd been drinking a lot. We need to talk. About what? I looked out the window, where the lights of the neighboring houses lit up in the thickening dusk. About how you slept with my wife, or about how you betrayed yours. Melissa knows, he was quiet. Vivian told her everything. Something in his tone made me wary. She left, took the kids, and went to her sister's. He took a paused breath. I ruined everything, didn't I? All of our lives. Don't you dare! I clenched the phone so hard the plastic crackled. Don't you dare look to me for sympathy. I'm not looking for... He paused. I just wanted you to know that Vivian and I were not going to be together. I was silent, staring at my reflection in the window pane. Tired face, week-old stubble, empty eyes. She's leaving, Lance continued. Got an offer from a newspaper in Seattle. Says we all need a fresh start. Seattle, the other end of the country. Vivian always said she loved that city, the rain, the coffee shops, the perpetual fall atmosphere. We were planning to go there on vacation. Now she's going alone. You know, I still remember when I introduced you. I remember you saying, lucky you, friend. Take care of her. Were you already planning it then? No. His voice shook. It was real then. Friendship, loyalty. I don't know when things changed. I do. I walked over to the bar, pulling out a glass. Everything changed when you decided that your feelings were more important than the promises we all made to each other. When lies became easier than the truth. Garrett, goodbye, Lance. I hit hang up and tossed the phone onto the couch. Outside the window, it was starting to rain again. The clock on the wall was ticking, the same one I'd fixed at the beginning of our married life. It was still running accurately, measuring the time of a life that was no longer there. In the morning came a text from Audrey. I brought coffee, black, 2 spoons of sugar. It's on your porch. I opened the door for the first time in many days. The coffee cup was still warm. Next to it lay the newspaper with Vivian's column, her latest article for the Boston edition. Farewell to the city, the headline read.